Mariella, tell me a little bit about the world of menopause and your work in it and how you got started.
Well, I guess I should probably start with how I got started, just to make clear that, it hasn't been a burning ambition of mine
Since you were a teenager.
since I was a teenager to work in the world of menopause.
Yes.
But I kind of went through a rough patch at the end of my 40s for a couple of years where I felt really anxious, which was quite alien to me, and quite insomniac. And the combination of the two, they were playing off against each other, just meant that I did slightly feel like I was losing my marbles. And, when I tried to find out what was happening, it was really, really hard. And finally, after a couple of years and having done blood tests to see if I was menopausal, one had come out saying I was peri, one had said I wasn't menopausal at all, and one had said that I was postmenopausal. And these were all in the space of about 4 months. My doctor at the time, and I'd been through quite a few, finally went, look, this isn't really working, is it? I'm going to send you to this gynecologist and see what she has to say. And I went to see Sarah Matthews, who's a wonderful gynecologist at the Portland. And of course, I was one of the lucky people who could afford, to go private, because I think, I'd spent a lot of time trying to resolve things through the NHS. And I just felt like I wasn't being listened to. A lot of the doctors I saw didn't really know what I was talking about. And I didn't even know whether I was menopausal or not. I mean, that only came up after about 18 months.
Because, what did you think it was?
Well, I thought I was going through a midlife total crisis, mental crisis, because the only symptom that I'd ever heard about was hot flushes. And also,
did you have those?
No, I mean, I had 2 in the space of those 2 years, but I mean, 2, you're not even sure if it's a hot flush or not, or you're just hot, or you're just stressed, and if you're not sleeping and you're anxious, then it might be just that. So I think the worst time for me was those 2 years when I was totally bewildered. I felt, as I said, like I was losing the plot, and I had no concept about it being menopause, because I thought menopause was this unwanted present that you got on your 51st birthday.
On the day.
On the day, and that was it, and then you kind of stepped away from the world at large, and went into cloistered living and then died.
Yes.
And that was all I knew about it, really.
And had you ever spoken to your mum about her menopause?
Not really. I mean, my only memory of any kind of acknowledgement of menopause with my mum was when she was in her 50s, I guess. She talked to me, she'd gone to the doctor because she wasn't feeling well, and he'd given her this patch, and she kept the patch on for about 3 weeks and said that it made her feel bovine, and she didn't like it, so she took it off, and that was the end of that. And so when I finally went to see this gynecologist and just spoke to her for 5 minutes and told her what I'd been experiencing, and she was Northern Irish, and she put her hand on my knee and she said, we can't have you feeling like this. And she said, I'm going to send you for a bone density scan. And I was like, I haven't slept for 2 years.
Stop checking
and
your bones.
I haven't slept. Who cares about my bones? And what's that got to do with anything? And it was at that moment when she began then to explain about all the sort of subliminal symptoms, that I understood that I was going through this passage that I knew absolutely nothing about. I mean, I was pig ignorant. And I just couldn't understand why, first of all, it was this huge secret. Secondly, why when you brought it up at dinner parties or whatever, people would sort of turn away or look horrified. I don't think if I'd said I had herpes, I don't think someone could have looked more shocked. And why so few people, even in the medical profession, seemed to know what was happening and how to support women going through it. And it just made me angry. And so that was when I started talking about it. Then I started talking to the BBC about making a documentary, and bearing in mind that, 55% of their viewers are women of 50 and upwards. The reluctance to kind of, film or talk about the topic, I thought was pretty dispiriting. And it took, I think, literally nearly 3 years, and finally breakthrough, and I was allowed to make this documentary, but it had to be about new breakthroughs. It couldn't be about the sort of centuries of shame and all of the other kind of, almost in a way, more important societal stuff that makes women feel so uncomfortable about it. But we made this documentary, and it was sort of the beginning. I mean, Kirsty Walker had made one a couple of years before, but mine got quite a bit of attention, and so it felt like the beginning of something. And then other women...
When was this?
Oh my God, don't ask me dates.
2017, 18, something like that?
Yeah, about 2017, I think. And then I just started talking about it, and didn't realise, in the way that I have never realised throughout my life, that I was tackling some big taboo. And so it became something that I was engaged with without me actually ever making the decision.
So it didn't feel, because when I think of you, you are, of course, the thinking woman, a man's crumpet. And you're
quite a lot of crumpet these days.
You're a campaigner. You're a campaigner. But do you think like that? Do you think I'm going to create a campaign around this issue, and this is the thing that got, like, how did it happen?
I suppose because of the documentary, I started talking about it in interviews and things like that, and then people would start getting in touch with me, and then Davina started working on her documentary, and then through somebody else, I was introduced to Carolyn Harris, the Labour MP, and she was just kickstarting this campaign around a single, we wanted it to be free, but what we ended up with was a single prescription charge annually for women who did want to take HRT, because up until then it had been a socio-economic choice, because women were having to pay a different prescription charge for each hormone, and they were having to do that monthly, and for an awful lot of women, that was just simply unaffordable, and because of the fact that HRT had been out of fashion for so long, since that 2002 Women's Health Initiative erroneous survey, there basically hadn't been much of a market for it, and so people hadn't really considered it. And it was at that point when I talked to Carolyn and things that I thought, you know what, like Jo Cox was a friend of mine, the MP who was sadly murdered, and she was an incredible advocate for working together. When she was at Oxfam, she got all the other charities working together, to try and combat global poverty and I had her voice ringing in my ear with this idea that, we have so much more power, and women know that anyway,
Stronger together. As someone else once said.
So much stronger together. And so I decided to just put together a call and get all of the kind of main campaigners, as we were at that time, together on this call to just see how we could possibly, pull all of our expertise and strengths into one pot. And that was the beginning of Menopause Mandate, which became this campaigning group that I currently chair, co-chair now with Tina Backhouse, who's brilliant. And that was when it sort of turned into something more than just me being really both angry, puzzled, and frustrated that so many women were going through what was a perfectly normal, life passage that really doesn't have to be as bad as it's portrayed if you know what's happening to you. My 2 years of misery would have been easily navigatable if I'd understood that this was perimenopause and that I could go to a doctor and talk to them and could be prescribed HRT if I wanted it for support, and also to, protect me from the underlying symptoms like heart disease and bone deterioration, osteoporosis. And I think it was just a sense of outrage. So no plan, no real decision to become a campaigner, but just kind of spurred by rage, which I think is often
the ultimate motivator,
and it's undervalued, and women who are angry are really, it's not very acceptable in women, but actually I think it's the motivator for so much good.
Well, it's always the power of FU, isn't it?
Yeah.
That coalesces. And if you were to look back a decade, because it is almost that, to making the documentary, what has changed?
Well, I think the conversation has changed dramatically, and it's opened out dramatically, and it's definitely on the menu. The government appointing me as the Menopause Employment Ambassador.
What does that
was
mean?
Well, it basically means that I talk to business and I try and also take what I've learned from women who are trying to go about their daily lives and carry on working. We lose 1.7 billion a year from women feeling unsupported during this passage of time and leaving the workforce and generally not returning. So it's about marrying those two things together and helping business to understand that these women are assets. These are women at the peak of their professional capabilities generally. And if you're going to invest all that money and time into an employee, to just let them slip through your fingers because they're having a bit of a rough time for a short period of time is kind of, economic madness, I would say. So that's what that was really about. But I think I took the position more because I felt that it again opened the conversation further, and I think that that's what's happened. The frustration is getting it through all the different layers of society, different communities that are still, very much, full of women suffering in silence and alone. And I think the reach out is hard. I'd say that most middle-class women, educated, know about menopause now, and, for the most part, are able to deal even with the kind of, medical treatment, which is doctors sort of saying, well, I don't rate HRT, or you're too young to be menopausal, and all of the things that we know happen. But I think it's much, much harder for women who don't feel that they have a voice,
yeah,
and are used to not being listened to, and are used to constantly questioning their validity in that dialogue. And that's what I'd like to see expand further. But I think, the single prescription charge, the fact that we managed to get menopause. One of the maddest things, I thought, was that we have this 40-plus health check that we're all offered, and it's meant to predict future conditions and mitigate for them, which is a very sensible thing to do. I mean, it doesn't work perfectly and lots of people don't get the invite, but the principle of it is a really good one, except for the fact that 50% of the people who are going for that health check, the one health challenge they're going to face is menopause.
Inevitably. There's no avoiding it.
No avoiding it. It's compulsory, and yet it wasn't mentioned at all in this health check. And again, it was just, to me, it was like a no-brainer. Like, how can that be? So we campaigned. I went to see West Streeting, and we managed to push that through. So hopefully that means that the next generation of women are going to step into this phase of life with a little more of a toolbox, and at least understand that the symptoms are, a very broad spectrum, as we now know, 50 and upwards, and that, you need to join all the dots in a slightly holistic way to understand that, yes, you're going through perimenopause and what you can do about it.
And for you, what were the main symptoms for you in your perimenopause and menopause journey and now?
Well, I mean, the ones that, were particular standouts were the anxiety and brain fog, because my mother and my grandmother my grandmother had and my mother has dementia.
Right.
And so one of my great fears was, am I going through
Yeah.
dementia? Is this the beginning of something, really bad? And then just a general feeling of not really being myself. I felt a bit bloated and I didn't have the energy that I used to have. I got tired more easily. And I guess, mood swings, I don't really remember them particularly.
You thought you were fine.
I thought I was fine, but my family tell me otherwise. And I think because I was so
I have
suffused.
the same story from my mother, who said that she had no menopause symptoms at all, and we can remember back to that time and beg to differ.
But I think for her generation, I sat next to this woman at dinner, and who I know vaguely, and she sort of went, "Oh, Mariella, I don't know why you keep going on and on about menopause. I mean, honestly," she's about 8 years older than me. She said, "Honestly, we just went through it, and I don't even remember experiencing a single thing, and I don't know why you keep going on about it. And it makes women look weak." And then 2 glasses of wine later, she started telling me about having suicidal ideation and severe depression in her late 40s. And I said, "Did it ever occur to you that that could have been attached to menopause?" And then we got into a deep discussion about what menopause is about. And the symptoms and everything. And by the end of it, she was kind of going, "Oh, maybe it's not such a bad idea."
And so over the last 15 years or so, what have you done? HRT, supplements, diet? Obviously, you're a huge advocate for nutrition, menopause nutrition. Just give me a little bit of how it works in Mariella world.
Well, as soon as I went to see the gynecologist, I went on to HRT. But I had to try a few different versions of it before I found what actually worked for me, And you don't find out until it's not working, and then you think that that's just because nothing's going to help. That some HRT, some people don't absorb it particularly well. The pill is another way of taking it. That didn't really work for me. I hated the patches, and I couldn't really handle the sort of 3 days on, 2 days off thing. So in the end, I now have a Sandrina a little pouch that I put on every day, and I take progesterone at night, and occasionally I remember to do testosterone.
Really?
I'm still not fully convinced, but I kind of think every little helps. And then diet. When I was about 50, I went to this place called Yotown in Devon, which is a fantastic kind of boot health camp. But I think what was revolutionary for me, really, because I've always been reasonably fit, walking, bit of gym, yoga, that sort of thing. What was revolutionary for me there was their diet, which kind of cut out about 6 or 7 food groups. And I ate like a horse for 5 days, and I thought, how on earth am I going to lose my belly, with this eating this much food? And I left there. And about 2 days later, I had a flat stomach for the first time in, a very long time, or at least since my perimenopause. And my whole digestion was working differently. And, I went on to write a cookbook with Bells Berry, very much based on the kind of learning that I had from Yotam, but trying to make, because they have a chef, and I wanted to make it easy for busy women.
Have you always been a cook?
I've always loved cooking,
yes.
But I mean, I've not always
me.
been a healthy cook.
Yeah.
I've been a kind of, I've learnt from my mother in the 70s, I made spag bol and shepherd's pie and, stuff like that. I'm quite good with pasta because my best friend's Italian, so I've had the benefit of having amazing pasta in Italy and kind of knowing how to do that. But Menalicious, the book, was much more about, gut health and, a lot more beans and fibre and all of those things, and obviously no ultra-processed food and getting rid of white flour and all of those things. And it definitely made me feel better. Supplements I've never been very good with, but mostly because I just forget to take them. And I've been sent a lot of supplements over this kind of menopause period. And, I've taken most of them for a couple of weeks and then forgotten. I'm just not very good at it. And maybe they would do wonderful things for me. But the thing that kept on bothering me the most was really just feeling like anything I ate that wasn't really healthy just sat on my stomach. And, the bloating carried on. The brain fog was helped by HRT, but I still felt like I wasn't really functioning fully. And thanks to you.
I know. Well, that's been the moment, hasn't it, for Better Gut, as it is for me, in the sense that if I ever think I'm going to miss a day, I have to charge into the office to make sure that I don't. So talk a little bit about that.
I think
taking it.
For me, I mean, I took it because you gave it to me.
So all the best people do,
I'm not a
Mariella.
supplement buyer.
Yeah.
And I think for me, what was really interesting was I had tried other supplements to do with digestion and gut health and probiotics. Because I kind of understood that was, in part what might help. But actually, I didn't find any great difference. And truly, when I took Better Gut, I did feel different. The bloating definitely decreased. I just felt a bit sharper, I guess. And also, it's pretty easy to take. I just take one at night, before I go to sleep, which is when I remember to take pills, because I never do in the morning because you have to take them with food and all of that stuff. So anyway, it just really worked. And I think, for all of us, even with the best intentions, we all want to be eating the perfect diet and putting the right nutrients in and making sure that we've got, all of the right, gut health ingredients and so on. But, most women have pretty busy lives, and it just isn't possible to stick constantly to a perfect diet. So I think having something that supplements that is really, really helpful for me, because it just means that I can go in and out of healthy eating, but I have this one constant.
Yeah, and I think for me, where it all began.
Well, I wanted to ask you, because the thing is, as I've kind of probably made clear, supplements is...
You're a skeptic.
I am a supplement skeptic. And I think lots of people are skeptical because it is a huge multi-million-pound industry. And, a lot of people, I think it's fair to say, have got into the business of sort of meno-washing, and they think they stick menopause on the label. And you look at the ingredients and it's exactly the same as the supplements for teenagers or something. And all of that makes it lose credibility. So why does Better Gut work? Why does it work?
But so where I started with all of it was 4 years ago, being very unwell. I ended up in hospital with pneumonia, being super poorly, coming out, not being able to feel better, not feeling like myself, seeing lots of doctors. And it was a throwaway line in the "you have perimenopause" conversation, which I found very insulting, actually, as a thing. And I think even 4 years ago, Mariella, I didn't really know what that meant. Like, perimenopause wasn't something that happened to women in their 40s, as far as I was aware.
No, and it wasn't even a word that we
what
knew,
does it mean?
Really.
No, and so I had the "what is that?" and then a throwaway line around, of course, there is an inextricable connection between the female microbiome in midlife and your menopause symptoms. And I was like, is there?
What?
I've never heard, what is that even? I feel like I eat sauerkraut, like what else do I need to do? And then going down the rabbit hole that entrepreneurs so often go down of how can I fix this problem for myself? Because I'm a very simple founder and everything I've built, I'm the ultimate consumer.
Yeah.
So I did exactly what you've just described. I wasn't a supplements person. I eat pretty healthily. I go to the gym. But I, upon that information, went and bought 20 probiotics and compared them all and asked around about what is the probiotic that's created at a level that I could show to a doctor that makes a difference to me in perimenopause, where you've told me I need to fix my gut. And the answer was, there was no such thing. So then I went down the rabbit warren of, okay, well, if there isn't such a thing, I'm going to make the thing because I want it and I want my friends to have it, because all of my symptoms were exactly as you described. A lot of them were gastro, but as so many of us feel, and as I began to understand, some of the other things that didn't feel gastro, brain fog, and for me, massive anxiety, which I'd never had, can be supported and helped if you get control of your gut.
Yeah.
And so then the process of finding a clinical nutritionist, finding a doctor, finding a supplements manufacturer that I trusted, with the essay question of, can we create a probiotic from scratch that makes a difference to women in peri and menopause and post-menopause? Because as I went deeper on the science and spoke to more doctors, that there's real science there that is not well understood. So that's the why. And so the 6 different probiotic strains that have been put together, and I felt supplements can be crap. They can be full of filler. They can be manufactured at a level that's not going to make a difference. With anything that's probiotic, it needs to be able to hit the gut, needs to be made. So if I'd have known probiotics were so hard, I'm not sure we started with them. But anyway, we do. And that's why Better Gut really works. I think because it's by women for women, it's women-led. And I think I was the first person to start from ground zero with the objective of, I want something that works and I want to build a business, as I've always done since I was 25 and now into my 50s. that makes a difference to women's lives. So I think that's the difference. And I think everybody I know who's taken it, even reluctantly, because I have had a lot of friends that say, well, it's you, so I'll try it, have then been in that position where they don't want to miss it for a day. So I think the efficacy is huge. And that's why it's the building block of everything that we do at the Better Menopause. But the answer to the question of the why is the 6 probiotic strains put together for the first time from answering that essay question of what is the formulation that will make a difference to women in midlife. And I think that's why it works and why I'm proud of it. And why for Better Menopause, everything that we do is formulated from that point of view. So Better Night, again, it's a totally selfish business. It's for me to solve.
Yeah, help me sleep.
I can't sleep. What do I take for sleep? Metabolism, because everybody, no matter how healthily they eat or how they train, and can end up with midlife, midsection weight gain.
Yeah.
Or a combination of weight gain and bloating, which is why we often recommend taking gut and metabolism together. And then the final product for us has been better libido, because people don't want to have sex anymore. And that's not a way for you to have joy and maintain relationships in midlife. So all of our products are compounds. So we don't produce a fish oil or a vitamin D. I don't think that's the point. I think women need to take fewer things, because what we also found when I started out on this is some of my friends were taking nothing, but some women were taking 20 different things a day. It was actually dangerous. And they were all...
Yeah, and it's so unregulated, isn't
utterly.
it?
So we go for highest quality. All of our ingredients have been through clinical trials, and we have the first menopause supplement in an NHS-sponsored clinical trial. So that's really important to me. We've got to make stuff that works. We have to make fewer. So at no point are we suggesting women take 20 things. That's wrong. You can take all of our formulations together if you want to take 4 things, but for me personally, I tend to mix it up. I haven't missed Better Gut in 3 years, and I don't think I would dare.
Yeah, I know. It's once you become reliant on something, you're reliant on it, aren't you?
So that's my evening, and then the others I chop and change depending on how things are going. But I think the honest answer to anything that works in this space is it's got to be created by women for women who are living it, because otherwise I think you can end up with meno washing and labelling things that aren't right, or the thing that I hate, which is taking advantage of women when they're feeling vulnerable.
Yeah,
and
when they'll
they're not
buy
feeling
anything,
themselves, and they're like, whatever it takes.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I'm really proud of the business, and I take the products myself every day, because I think every time with our all-female team and the nutritionists and the doctors that we work with, we go to how can we create something that makes a difference to women's lives.
You know, I was talking about the prescription charge and how that was like unaffordable for an awful lot of women. I was given a statistic the other day, which is that women in the UK spend £129 a year on average on supplements. And I guess, you know, better education about supplements.
Yeah.
But also, do you think there should be more regulation or something? Because obviously yours are more expensive.
Yep.
But far rather spend money on something that works than spend a lot of money on things that don't.
Anything that's cheap won't work. It's just not possible. You can't have the level of ingredients that you need in a formulation where every ingredient has been through a clinical trial and sell something for a £5. You're just buying rubbish. So I think my message is always buy less that does more. And actually my real message is, if you can do anything, buy Better Gut, because I think that is the one that we hear time and time again makes a huge difference to the way that women feel.
And I think it's really heartening as well, because, you know, I'm doing this live show, trying to bring the menopause message even further out into the world. I'm humiliating myself on stage. I'm going to Edinburgh for the festival.
Yes, tell us about that.
No, but I mean, so the show just basically covers all of the things I would have liked to have put in my early that documentary, and more, because obviously I've learned a lot over the last decade, but also tries to invest it with some humour, and it's just a chance for women and men to come along and learn a bit more about it, but also have a laugh, because honestly we've had people laughing at us for centuries and it's quite nice to kind of laugh together and at ourselves. But I think the thing about it is, when you talk about the history of menopause, is that this is a history of the very sex that would never go through any of it misdiagnosing, misrepresenting, you know, something that women were going through. And now to have women in positions in life where they can actually think specifically about women and understand what's happening to their bodies, because you're going through it yourselves, I think has to be a kind of catalyst for really good change, really positive change.